Right, let's talk more on the UN's resolution veto by Russia and China with John Laughlin from the Institute for Democracy and Cooperation in Paris. Thank you for coming on the programme today. So Russia's envoy to the UN said that a resolution on Syria could lead to a Libyan-style foreign military intervention. What's your take on that?
Well, I think they're right. I think the envoy is right. I think Moscow has been very annoyed with NATO, with Britain, France and America for the way they exploited the Libyan resolution, the resolution on Libya, the one which Russia abstained on and therefore allowed to pass. Russia has said repeatedly during the Libyan campaign that the terms of that resolution were being misused. That resolution, after all, only talked about protecting civilians, whereas no sooner had it been voted than Western leaders, the British Defence Secretary, for instance, admitted that regime change was the very goal. And Russia's protests at that were in vain. I have to say Russia suffered a defeat over Libya because she opposed the policy of regime change, but ultimately had to recognise the new regime in Libya, which she did a few weeks ago. So naturally there's a lot of bad feeling, and I'm sure diplomats in Moscow and no doubt the president who decides these things feels that Russia was taken for a ride over Libya and won't be taken for a ride over Syria.
Now, with this situation with Syria being compared to that of Libya, as you were mentioning, the UN resolution 1973 for Libya, as you mentioned, was supposed to be a humanitarian intervention there, a humanitarian campaign. But when it comes to Syria, if NATO, with the strong support of the United States, really wanted to go into Syria, surely they could just easily drum up a reason to justify it. I mean, look at the so-called humanitarian intervention in Libya.
There's no doubt they could do it if they wanted, and there are plenty of examples, unfortunately, for them having done that. Everybody knows that the attack on Iraq in 2003 was waged without United Nations Security Council approval, as was the attack on Yugoslavia over Kosovo in 1999. So yes, there are plenty of cases of this. However, the Iraq War, as I'm sure your viewers know, was the object of massive opposition in Western countries itself, particularly in Britain, but also in America. And one of the main reasons why the opposition was so strong was that there was no Security Council approval of that war. And people felt, rightly, that it was therefore illegal. And I think that's why the Western governments are keen to obtain some kind of legal cover, in my view bogus, but they want the appearance, at any rate, of legal cover for their actions now in the Middle East.
Well, moments ago you mentioned the issue of Iraq. Many saying that there are certainly some ulterior motives there when it comes to, for example, the mineral wealth of that country. In Libya, we're now seeing NATO members harvesting billion-dollar oil contracts. I mean, does Syria actually have anything worthwhile to justify NATO even going in there?
Well, no, I think the interest of Syria for the Western powers is obviously its great proximity to Israel. It's been a party to the war against Israel. It's one of the big opponents of the Israeli state. That's its importance for America and for Britain. Its importance is as a geopolitical factor right next to Israel, a country which obviously America and Britain and the other Western powers strongly support. So that would be the ulterior geopolitical motive rather than oil. There isn't any oil in Syria, no.
So other than no energy interest here, but geopolitical interest, as you say here. But some analysts suspect the West is targeting Assad's regime because of Syria's close ties with Iran and Hezbollah. Now, you mentioned Israel there. Could there be any links, any truth to that?
I'm sure that's very definitely part of the reason. Syria effectively controls Lebanon, which is, of course, Israel's immediate neighbour. Syria is also a strong ally of Iran, and we all know that Iran has been in the Americans' and in the Israelis' crosshairs for a long time. So, yes, there is an arc, if you like, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, of geopolitical opposition to Israel and to America's role in the Middle East. And there's no doubt, we should never forget that the whole Arab Spring, the whole rhetoric of an eruption of democracy and liberalism in the Arab world, proclaimed by Obama in his speech in Cairo shortly after he became president, in other words, long before these uprisings actually started. This rhetoric recalls the rhetoric of liberation in Eastern Europe. In other words, it has a very important, in 1989, in other words, it has a very important geopolitical role, because after all, let's not be naive. The regimes which the Americans and the other Western powers want to see come to power as a result of these uprisings are obviously friendly ones. They want the Middle East to be remodeled along lines which make the Middle East safe for Israel, to put it very bluntly. That was a goal proclaimed by George Bush the son, George W. Bush, and it's effectively the same policy, albeit in a different guise, that Obama is now pursuing. And that's the context, that's the geopolitical context in which we should see this sabre rattling now against Syria.
Wish we had more time to cover this in more depth. John Laughlin from the Institute for Democracy and Cooperation in Paris. Many thanks indeed.